Previously I ran a video showing how to do trimming of cores for these laminations like this. Now when you do a lamination like this, of course, you want the overlaps to be cut perfectly to the core that you're building out from. And here's an example of a large lamination block in process, and you can see how the overlaps come out here, and to put the next layer on, I want to trim these flush to the surface. The problem arises that to do that on a table saw, which would be the tool of choice, you can't run this overlapped edge on your rip fence because you can't guarantee the alignment. And since when you're gluing these, you're not really trying to get them perfectly aligned, that's going to be all over the map. With this fixture, which I used before, and I showed this in a previous video, you can clamp this in position and then run this surface of the fixture up against the rip fence with the calibration method that I showed in the other video. And that works well, but now that I'm doing this blank, I ran into an issue. I have a 10-inch table saw. Since I have nice large blade stabilizers on there, the most I can cut height-wise is about 3 inches. And that's the square size that I want to make this. So I'm just about at the limit of my table saw right on the table saw table. If I put the blank into this fixture, you can see that it's going to raise it up by the distance of the thickness of this piece of wood. So I wouldn't be able to cut all the way through, and I was thinking, how can I possibly trim this off? Now, if you think about this clearly, all you want to do is register to one of these surfaces first, cut the opposite side, and then you'll be able to rotate it around to that cut side up against your rip fence and trim off the other two overlaps. So if you think about it this way, all you need is a piece of wood. This strip of wood is, maybe an inch tall. The width is about a ½ an inch, and all these dimensions are in terms of about. Just something sizable. The key point is that both of these surfaces here have to be perfectly parallel, so you can simply cut it on the table saw. You want it about the length of the blank that you're trying to laminate. And what you're going to do is simply use carpet tape to tape this down on the core edge, so that then you can run this piece of wood up against your rip fence and trim the other overlaps. Let me show you how I do that. I get carpet tape or otherwise good, really sticky double stick tape. Don't use the foam type tape. Use something fairly thin, because the foam might be a little bit of give and it could put you on an angle. I cut a strip like this, and then I just trim it down widthwise here and put it on either end of this piece of wood. So I can just stick it down and stick it down on the other end here. You don't have to go the whole length, but if you feel like putting it the whole length, it won't hurt anything. Then, of course, peel off the other side here to expose the adhesive. And when you do this, it has to sit perfectly flat on your core. And what that means is that when you're gluing, you have to be careful enough so that at least one side doesn't have any glue drips. As you can imagine, when you're gluing it this way, if you put a lot of glue on the top surface and clamp it down, you get those glue drips that come down. You can't have that, because this has to fit nice and perfect on that edge. Here I've made sure I have no glue drips. If you have some glue drips, you can chisel and flush, or you could even take this piece of wood and just notch it up a little bit so that you're still just contacting on the two ends. But in this case, I can just stick this down. and you push it down really well. Make sure you're secure. You could even go to a vise if you wanted to, just put a little pressure on there just to make sure it's really tight. But this is on there pretty well now. Now, I clean up my table saw. The next step is that you have to really just eyeball this. Your rip fence has to be nicely in a line. And I'll be able to run this down. And I'll show you how that's accomplished. If you're doing this and you find that maybe the first cut when you start to cut into the blade isn't quite far enough in, you can just back it out and notch the rip fence a little closer and go carefully until you get it exactly where you want it. Let's give this a try. You see that went pretty smoothly. I had to take a couple attempts to get it dialed in properly. But now I'm trimmed down one side and I can now take this off. Make sure you take the adhesive off what you're going to cut next and use the same method, but now you can run this edge, which has just been perfectly trimmed, on your rip fence. You'll have to move it over, of course, to get the flushness like I just did. And that's how you can trim a section like, a lamination like this as you go out from a core. I hope that helps you, and I would also make a point to say that yes, it works fine, it works beautifully, but this method here would work better if, as you can imagine, the core is small. Maybe you're starting out from a 1/2 inch core. That would not work as well with this piece of wood method because it could rotate on you. It's kind of a small piece to run on your table saw. So you might still want to use this method for the smaller laminations, but for the larger, this method works even better and it's easier to set up. I hope that helps.